So how did Blinken frame the China challenge as he sees it?
Well, as you say, this was another repudiation of that 4 years of America First, and another attempt, of course, by the Biden administration to rebuild these alliances with their European allies. And the message on China from Blinken was that we want to out-innovate China, and we are not going to lecture you about your relationships with that country. We understand, essentially, the message was that you have to have trading relationships with China, but you have to be aware of the risks. He says we're going to rely on innovation, not ultimatums. It's not going to be about us or them. In terms of the risks, he pointed, by the way, to 5G as an example. 5G technology, he says that is clearly a surveillance risk when you look at the Chinese technologies. And he suggested that maybe countries like Finland and Sweden, South Korea and the US could come together and build out an alternative. So this was really a nod to the fact that many European countries are very uncomfortable with the idea that you have to choose between Beijing and Washington simply because of the economic impacts that that choice would have.
So, Tom, in the meantime, we see that the SEC has started implementing this law that could eventually force some pretty major Chinese companies to delist from the US. So is this kind of the lifting of the lid on that financial audit process that starts it?
That's right. So this law was signed into law back towards the end of last year by the Trump administration. Now the SEC, the Securities Exchange Commission, is starting to implement that gradually. So what they're telling the auditors of these overseas companies are that you need to open up the books so that our inspectors can take a look at the audit process. Now, this is something that China has pushed back on for years. They've refused to allow this because they cite national security concerns. Lawmakers in the US, so say, look, if we don't get proper access, if our inspectors can't have a look at the audits, then it exposes US investors to potential fraud. So that's why this law was signed off, and that's why the SEC is acting now. Potential implications, of course, for companies like Alibaba and Baidu, both of which are listed in the US. And this is the start of the process. They'll have to open their books for 3 years. If they don't do that, then they face being forced off at the New York Stock Exchange.